Shalom, everybody, and Hag Sameach. It's Shavuot 2010-11, as far as that coincides with the Torah portion, so it's 2011. Anyway, my message for Shavuot is called The Smaller Great. And basically, it's not directly related necessarily to the readings as much as it is to Shavuot, which Shavuot is a funny holy day because there's not a lot of information on it. It's not like Pesach where it tells you all these instructions to do, or Sukkot, or Yom Kippur even. That's pretty specific. The instructions that we have are based off of the temple system. We're to bring the 2 loaves out of our habitations, but like for us personally, we don't do that because you're supposed to give them to the priests. Well, if you can't give them to the priests, then you have taken these loaves out, and I don't really like misappropriating things that were supposed to go to the priest. You know, if I eat them, then I didn't do what I was supposed to do. If I give them to somebody, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So we remember the parts that we can't really keep, and I just kind of leave it at that. Anyway, this concept of first fruits, though, this holy day is centered around the second set of holy days. Even though it seems like it's in between the holy days, it's really not. It's first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the barley harvest is represented in the first set of holy days, Pesach, Hamatzah, and Yom Bikurim. And then the wheat harvest is the second set of holy days, which starts with Shavuot and then goes with Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. So anyway, this concept of bringing this first fruits of the wheat harvest, or the second harvest, is interesting because my message is called The Small Are Great. And it seems kind of contradictory. Well, how can the small be great? Well, these first fruits are really an example of whatever you take. Say your first fruits are, I'm not going to talk in wheat terms since I'm not really a farmer. I'll keep it in monetary terms. Say I have $100 or $1,000 in my tithe that I've set apart, that I've made so far since Sukkot, when the tithe is given. That means that is 1/10 of what Yodewahe has blessed me with. So if I have $1,000, He's given me $10,000. You know, the math on that is very simple. It's connected. In other words, it's whatever you have for your tithe is connected to the whole. Since it's a part of that, it's 1/10. And what makes that relevant is it's also, once you understand the mechanics of this, you can look at the relationship and realize too that if you know, it's just like math, if you know what the 10th is, then you can tell what the whole is going to be. Well, since this is linear and it's going across time because you haven't finished the harvest yet, you know that the 10th, if it is a 10th that you're bringing, the first fruits, I don't know if the first fruits are always a 10th necessarily, but they are a portion. But in the concept of the 10th, or the tithe, it's prophetic to the whole, which means if I know that I have 1 bushel of wheat, I know that I'm going to get a total of 10 bushels of wheat, because 1 bushel would be 1/10. So in this way, it's interesting that we stop and we take a look at what we've been blessed with. This is my understanding of Shavuot. There's all kinds of different things and traditions, but from the reading, what I see, this concept of first fruits is really about being appreciative. It's the first blessings that have come before the big harvest. It lets you know, have an idea that there's going to be number 1 harvest, and that it's going to be, X times as good as what you've already brought forth. So it's about appreciation and thanksgiving, and like I said, it fits the pattern of being prophetic in the sense of what's to come. The first fruits are also scalable, which means that as you increase them, because they are connected and they're prophetic, then that means that you can scale them up to predict what the whole harvest is going to be like. So, like I said, if you have $1,000 you've tithed so far, then not only do you know what you've made so far, you can find your way back from the starting point, but you can also, for some people, kind of predict what to expect in the future if things stay the same. And that's very interesting. When we look at this concept in Torah, our family, we treat this as a time of appreciation. We write out a list of all the things that we're appreciative of. We write out how much we've put into our tabernacle tithe so far, and what that means as far as all of our increase we've already been blessed with. And you look at this concept and you think, well, how can I manage this? We'll move forward and you can see that there's kind of a funnel concept going on, which this whole concept of first fruits is very useful in Torah study, in life, in all these things. The funnel concept basically says that the small part is in direct relationship, that's the scalability of it, to this larger part. So depending if you're trying to find the small part, if you have the small part and you're looking backwards to see where it came from, what was the hole that this little part came from, or whether you're trying to look at the whole picture and say, well, if this is what's happened so far, what should I expect to happen in the future? Then we can see that it's basically this concept almost like goal setting. First fruits are a lot like goals. Essentially, you have to be able to break down the big into the small. So in the case of a tithe, you break down what you've made, say the $10,000, and you break it down into a tenth of that, a small portion. And if you tithe off everything that you have increased, then you can, reverse engineer and see all the things based on everything that you get. You know that a certain percentage or ratio of it's going to go towards your tithe. It helps you break down things when you understand that relationship. It's the same when we're studying the Torah. The Torah is a whole, God is a whole. We're called members of Mashiach's body. So we're a small part of a greater thing, as we learned in last week's Parashat. The lamps were a small part of the larger menorah. And what that means is there's connections, there's how it's scaled. As it says, the tabernacle and the things here on earth are a smaller version of the greater true things in heaven. Once you start understanding those patterns, it's going to help your Torah study. You'll learn how to break things down into their smaller parts. You'll understand as an individual why the Torah manages such small details, even what are our thoughts when we look at a woman. When you manage the small, that ultimately turns into eventually, potentially, that seed. The same happens with righteousness. That thought of being thoughtful, it's at the root, and being appreciative. It's at the root of what blossoms into much greater things. And our habits are basically consistent small things. So if you look at a funnel, you see the small part here, and it gets to the big part. With any goal, if you figure the small parts out out, then you can figure that if I just do those things consistently long enough, I can calculate how great it'll be a year from now, 2 years from now, how much I'll accumulate 10 years from now. And our habits are that way. So we manage the way we act and the choices that we make to see if they're righteous. Because when we manage the small details, it really makes a big picture, a big impact on our whole life. And remember that these things are linear, so they go over time. They're moving out like that. So it becomes this funnel that gets bigger and bigger as it goes along this scale. And that's the same way the first fruits work. You have that small portion that you've harvested, and when you take over time the continual effort, you can kind of predict how big that harvest really is going to be. And so we want to use these things to our benefit. That's why daily Torah study is important, because it's a small thing that if you look at the Parashat, I created a Bible study system where I break it down into daily portions, and those daily portions are broken down into certain portions we read in the morning, certain portions we read in the evening. So when you funnel it all down, you can say, well, I can manage this little piece, and if I do this little piece twice a day, that's going to mean I'm going to get this much done by the end of the week, and then going into Shabbat, I'm going to have already been familiarized with the Torah portion instead of just hearing it for the first time in one ear, out the other. Is what a lot of people do with that, instead of having dealt with it all week, so that way, when you get to Shabbat, you have some thoughts on it. So this is how I'm seeing that this concept of that the small things are great, because they're directly connected. When you understand that connection, and you understand how powerful your daily habits are, how important your use of every moment of your time and all your choices are, they turn into your whole life, an example of your whole life. That's why we launch righteous judgment, because it starts with righteous judgment, understanding the standards, so we can make the right choice in the moment. And those choices will lead to actions, and those actions will lead to our whole life and everything that flows out of that. The Torah is very much has a concept of radiance, just like light does. It has a center in it, and it radiates out, and it gets and expands the further out you get it. And it's the same way. Your choices that you make, the little choice over here that you make, to either be wicked or righteousness, it tends to grow. You know, one of the laws of physics is something that's in motion tends to stay in motion. And so if you do a wicked choice, you actually make the next wicked choice easier, because it's easier to just keep doing that wicked choice than to stop it. You'd have to take action against that. And it's the same way with righteousness. That's why what choices we make are so important. And then when you make a string of good choices, you don't want to ruin it by starting all over and going the other direction. And this goes to the heart of what Shavuot's about, in my opinion, which is appreciation. And you can really compare appreciation versus complaining, like this last week's Torah portion. Appreciation, it spawns, it puts you in it helps you find out what's right with something instead of what's wrong with something. And if you're finding out what's right with something and you're appreciating it, you're going to value it more, and you're not going to be focused on the negative. You're going to take care of those things. You're going to the fruit of appreciation is going to be more blessings, being opened up and aware of new opportunities, and really making the most of what you already have. In our society, so many people's eyes, they're on what they don't have, what's wrong with everybody and everything, and what they don't have. It's all looking forward instead of appreciating that we, where we are in America, we're so blessed. The poor people here are so much wealthier than the poor people, say, in Africa or some of the other poor countries. It's a lack of, just like the people complaining about the manna. You were in a desert where you could have been starving to death, having nothing, and you have manna falling out of the sky or appearing from heaven. That's pretty incredible. That's not the time to worry about what you don't have. It's to appreciate those things and find out and understand them more deeply of the kind of blessing they are, so that you can be blessed and you can see opportunities to be blessed in other things that you already have. So I think that's a very relevant message in our time, in our world where the economy is bad and people are being trained by corporations to be so gluttonous and to constantly be dissatisfied. They train society to be dissatisfied because otherwise they won't be able to sell their new product, which is almost exactly like the last one you already have, but only slightly different. But we've got to make you dissatisfied with that to make you think you need the next great thing. And so they've really trained people to be dissatisfied instead of being appreciative. And I hope that you spend this time during Shavuot as we think about the first ripe fruits and the blessings that we've already received, with a foreshadowing of what's the bigger blessings that are to come, that we stop and take appreciation and realize the power of our choices and the small things that are great. And it starts with appreciation. So I will say to all of you guys out there, Hag Sameach, happy Shavuot for 2011.